Yorick is the split-pushing, late-game monster that can win games alone, but he has one big problem: mobility. But I have found a player who has fixed that with a Prowler's Claw assassin build. He can now dash onto enemies and bonk them to death. Meet Slogdog, a challenger assassin Yorick player. This pick is hilarious to watch, with high damage ghouls that can quite literally one-shot enemies by themselves. He's also found a trick to dodge tower shots with Madien, so you can dive enemies with no risk. Challengers and pro players don't even want to play against this guy. He's single-handedly raised the ban rate of Yorick after beating them too many times. And of course, we all love to see an assassin jungler getting one-shot by a Yorick. Let me show you how Assassin Yorick works. But first, this video is sponsored by Guild Wars 2, one of the biggest MMOs with an estimated 650,000 daily players, and is now launched on Steam. Guild Wars 2 is completely free to play with no subscription required, so you can play hundreds of hours with no cost, with absolutely no pay-to-win microtransactions. The character art in this game is incredible. Even Chime is cosplaying this week in his favourite Guild Wars armour, and there's now a new expansion named End of Dragons. So now is a great time to get started. Travel through the early levels and experience all the years of content and deep stories the developers have added. To sign up and get a free pet, as well as a free $10 value starter set, click the link in the description, sign up to that website, and the website gives you a key for the bundle, so then you can easily go to Steam and download the game, and all of your free gifts will be available when you redeem the code in-game. And while you're waiting for the game to download, there's a new player guide on this website. Very welcoming compared to some games. If you want a new world to explore full of quests and unique stories, sign up for Guild Wars 2 now using my link in the description, and of course get your free bonus. Back to Yorick and our player Slogdog. Slogdog is a League veteran who started playing all the way back in Season 1, and he's always loved playing weird, unpopular champions. His favourites were the old Yorick, old Mordekaiser, and Urgot, as they were all so mind-blowingly different to every other champion. He said that he felt like these picks were like playing a completely different game, so for a full 6 years, Slogdog never even tried Ranked, happy to play these unpopular picks in normal games, never truly testing his potential. This completely changed in Season 7 when Yorick was reworked. Slogdog immediately loved this pick. The tiny ghouls he had running around, the bizarre new CC he got on his W, the champion was just as weird as he hoped. But Yorick was not quite so liked by everyone else in his games. In fact, even when Yorick had just been released, people were already flaming our player for even picking the champion because they assumed that he was trolling. Such a huge difference from the modern champion releases. Well, Slogdog was not discouraged by this, and actually took this flame as motivation. He wanted to prove to everyone that this champion was not actually that bad, so he went right into Ranked, getting addicted to the grind, hitting Diamond this season and making his first Yorick montage. A year later, Slogdog met a challenger Yorick jungle player named Ninetails, a legend on the OCE server, and funnily they were both playing Yorick jungle with the same build and runes, so our player knew he was doing something right. On his climb to challenger, he met probably the only Australian player any of us have ever heard of, Midbeast, and of course had to get a quick solo kill in with this crazy pick. Climbing incredibly fast, he hit Challenger just 2 seasons after starting Ranked. All those years of normal games and testing picks really paid off when he finally put in the effort. But that wasn't the end of his story. After a couple of seasons break, Slogdog came back to League in Season 11, patch 11.7, the patch that completely broke Yorick. In Riot's attempt to buff Yorick to make him more viable, they made the Ghoul's jump on his E do double damage, leading to some crazy clips where Yorick can quite literally one-shot people just with these ghouls. Riot realised their stupid mistake and immediately nerfed this in the next patch, but this one-shot is still possible in the current patch, and so Slogdog has stuck with this build ever since. With a crazy win streak, he was right back in Challenger with this Lethality Yorick build. So why is Lethality even good on Yorick? It's simple. It turns him from the boring Kiteable juggernaut into what he calls a Necromancer Mage. Instead of being a melee champion, he's now able to throw his ghouls onto enemies and get kills with just this one ability. The ghoul damage scales with AD, so buying lethality makes them really strong, and with his ultimate, the Madien, doing magic damage, this also scales based on Yorick's AD, and does percentage health damage as well, so with this high AD build, you're basically impossible to itemize against. It's really smart. With Prowler's Claw even added on to help him gap close, Yorick is now a whole new champion, and one that you definitely don't want to go anywhere near. But does this build ruin his split pushing? No, in fact he actually becomes an even faster split pusher, with towers taking more damage from this build than any normal Sheen related build, and also 1v1s in a side lane are way easier. This pick really has it all. Yorick is a weird pick, and this build is even even weirder, so let's just get into a game to see how it even works. At level 1, Yorick is super weak in a lot of matchups. Slogdog often sits back, just staying in XP range, letting the enemy hit the wave, and giving up control. He knows that if he doesn't hit the wave, eventually it'll push into him. Yorick is one of the best late game scaling split pushers that can absolutely win games by himself, so there's really no pressure to fight at level 1 in lane. Once the wave reaches him, he immediately needs to start using Yorick's passive. Slogdog last hits with his Q to create 4 graves. Yorick with 4 graves compared to having no graves are two completely different champions. Being able to use his Q again to spawn 4 ghouls, Yorick's damage is instantly doubled, and already he can start to look for kills, even against these challenger players. He takes Ignite, traps the enemy in his W, and then uses his E to throw ghouls at the enemy to chase them down. If an enemy ever jumps onto you, instantly he puts a box on the ground, they get stuck. Yorick himself can actually just walk away and let the ghouls do all of the work, stacking his Conqueror with the ghouls, igniting and finishing the enemy off with Q for a solo kill. But at level 6 this pick gets even weirder, and Slogdog started telling me how he's able to use the AI of the Madien as well as the ghouls to get advantages against enemies. There are some ridiculous things he can do with this trick, so strap in. Madien is Yorick's companion in lane, his partner that has a 3-minute cooldown at level 6, so he really wants to keep it alive at all costs. Madien is pretty much like having a friend who has 2000 ping, but does love to follow you around, even if they're a couple seconds behind you. So every time they're fighting and Madien gets into a risky situation, Yorick backs off fully to guide it back to safety. After specifically 2 seconds of fighting, the Madien will leave and follow him. Yorick is usually a short range pick, but with this lethality build, he's now able to mess with enemies even under their tower. Madien is a renewable source of ghouls, so every time a minion dies nearby while the Maiden's alive, another ghoul will spawn, so Yorick can continuously spam E on the enemy under tower, making them deal with 4 high damage ghouls jumping at them every time, in every wave, until they're finally low enough to get dived by his high damage Q. So this is where the AI trick comes in to help with this. Yorick can dive enemies without tower even hitting him, or his ghouls, or his Madien. It seems really unfair, and it is. His ghouls and Madien are classified as pets in the game, so whenever they hit an enemy, Yorick is meant to be given tower aggro. So because of this, when his pets are hitting someone, Slogdog moves in and out of tower range to confuse the tower aggro, continuously resetting it. This means that the ghouls and the Madien won't ever be getting hit, but they can keep doing damage. And Yorick also won't be the one getting hit, because he keeps leaving tower range. The enemy is stuck under their tower, taking damage with no one to help them out. Madien also spawns 4 ghouls instantly when it gets used, so a trick that Slogdog uses is have 4 graves on the ground, and the 4 ghouls active from the ult, pressing E on an enemy, and then whenever a ghoul dies, a new one will immediately spawn and jump right out of the ground onto the enemy for even more damage. This is super overpowered and really annoying for the enemy, continuously having to deal with ghouls, and Riot didn't even put this feature in the ability description, so how are enemies meant to know? With all of these tricks, and Yorick rushing lethality as soon as possible, his damage is now getting very high. The ghouls aren't just annoying, they're a full-on poke ability that forces enemies to go back to base. So Yorick's goal is to keep pushing to get tower plates every time he gets the chance. If you kill an enemy, that's a tower plate. If the enemy roams, that's a tower plate. Aiming to get his Prowler's Claw as fast as possible. Prowler's Claw on Yorick is very funny looking. Enemies already don't really know how Yorick works, and then with all of this extra AD and a dash, Yorick can abuse this inexperience even more. Every champion in the game now seems to have a dash, and Yorick is finally joining them, being able to slow the enemy with his E to send in the ghouls, and then dash onto the enemy afterwards to follow up and finish off the kill. Solo kills of course are great, but we all know that Yorick only wants one thing: towers. His goal is to get as many plates as he can, and then get first tower, and ideally rotate to bot lane to start taking their tower as well, aiming to get more gold and maximize his resources. If his bot lane doesn't want to swap, then he stays in top lane trying to get second tier tower and stealing the enemy jungle camps, which funnily his ghouls can solo. If Yorick has 4 ghouls, he can just throw an E at a camp and walk away. The ghouls will stay aggroed on it and just collect the gold for him. This point of the game is where high elo players usually tell you to focus on objectives. Dragons are good, they win games, you should be grouping up with your team. But this guy is different. He told me he looks at objectives and then avoids them at all costs. That means getting as far away from them as you can, and staying on the opposite side of the map to pressure. If they fight Dragon, you go top lane to try and get towers. If they fight Rift Herald, then you should be in bot lane trying to get the tier 2 tower, which is now worth 600 gold by the way, which is the same gold as getting 2 kills. Yorick is now getting stronger and stronger, scaling up, not caring about a single silly objective. Yorick is the raid boss, he's the real objective that enemies should be worrying caring about. His goal is to get to 5 items, which is a ton of AD, because at this point our player knows he can carry any game. He's confident he will win if he gets to that point, so that's all he cares about doing. This doesn't mean he can't join teamfights, especially with his W, which is a great playmaking tool. His W acts as not only a trap to stop enemies leaving the fight, but also as a new piece of terrain, which can really mess with enemies' pathing. So in this clip, Jax makes a really aggressive play, then realizing he's made a mistake, so he decides to leave as soon as he can. He clicks his mouse up here to run back to where he came from, but you can see that League of Legends doesn't let him do that. Due to the terrain, it routes him to the right and around, as this is the new shortest path for him to go, and this ends up getting him killed. Enemies cannot click past the W to run away, and it's quite hard to destroy quickly, so this trick can get you extra kills, and enemies will just end up confused as to what happened. It's a really weird ability, but placing it in choke points like this is a great way to win a fight by itself. It also interrupts abilities, things like Sion's Q, Tahm Kench's W, and even some dashes. The wall has a tiny knockback, so it stops things like channels, and that alone can get you a game-winning kill. As the game gets later and later, and Yorick builds up some items, your job is now to end the game. Kill the Nexus, whatever it takes. Getting solo kills in a side lane is simple at this point, so he wants to force a 1v1, get a kill, and then push quickly, killing tower in just a couple of hits. And yes, this is without any Sheen items. Don't forget that Madien does percentage HP only if you auto-attack the same target, so even if enemies build a ton of armor to counter you, this little adaptation will give you a huge amount of damage. Yorick can even solo kill towers without minions, spawning his Madien and Ghouls to reduce the tower's resistances, and then soloing it by himself. A great new way to backdoor. So to give this pick a rating, one of Yorick's biggest weaknesses is one no one really talks about. Of course he's an immobile champion, we all know, but he doesn't scale very well with armor or magic resist, so he's never really going to be a frontline, no matter what build you go. So to me this high damage build makes a lot more sense than the meta one. I do think Yorick is heavily underrated. He's barely picked at all, but much like lots of weird picks, when a good player picks them, enemies are going to have to deal with you, or you can win the game alone. This pick itself is high risk, and Slogdog says the learning curve is a long one, but once you've mastered it, you're absolutely rewarded for your effort. And you can really see this on the stats for his server, where Yorick has had a ridiculously high ban rate for a while now in Master Plus. These high elo players hate playing against Slogdog and the other Yorick so much that his ban rate is reaching the same level as Irelia on this server. He is a menace to high elo games. Slogdog believes that every matchup is winnable. There are some harder ones like Irelia, Tryndamere and Jax, but with the lethality build your Ghouls are the ones doing most of the work, so Yorick can safely stay away from them and still win. For his full build that has some crazy synergy with his Ghouls, start Longsword refillable potion every game, as it lets you get to Serrated Dirk faster than the enemy, and Longsword has the most AD at level 1, making your damage higher than any Doran's item. Then straight into Prowler's Claw for your mythic. You can also go Eclipse, which is much better against tanks, or if you're in lots of long fights, with the Ghouls even being able to proc the shield and movement speed for you, tank boots to help him survive, then Hullbreaker second item. This item's honestly still really good. For a time it was really overpowered and everyone built it first item, but now it's just really good as a second or a third one. It's a perfect example of people reacting too much to a patch. Then Grudge to get some armor pen, with the slows repeatedly proccing from your pets. Then Black Cleaver, which again is stacked by your pets, so enemies are going to lose a ton of armor. Serpent's Fang against shields and Chemtech Chainsword against healing are also good options, finishing the build with Guardian's Angel to make you even more annoying. Slogdog plays with Teleport Ignite every game, Teleport for side laning and backdoors, Ignite for early kills to get him ahead. Flash, however, is better against burst champions, and it's a much safer summoner spell, especially since most of us aren't challenger top laners who can track the enemy jungle perfectly like he can. For runes he goes Conqueror every game to help him win longer fights, Demolish in his secondaries, which is obviously great on every split pushing champion. Slogdog is a Twitch streamer and a YouTuber as well. Please check him out at the links in the description, and please also check out Guild Wars 2 from the link below. Just like Yorick, with my link you can get a free pet and a free starter set, so make sure you check out the game below. Thanks so much for watching.